Well, congratulations, lucky subscriber. You're watching the Spruce Gosling YouTube channel, if that's not too grand a term. We have decided to join the growing ranks of people who are moving towards electric traction, but being of not sufficient means financially to get an electric car like a Tesla or something like that, or even an affordable one. We're going down the electric bike route, and well, to be honest, we can't even afford really to get an electric bike, so we're going to convert one of our existing bikes to electric assist, which seems like a pretty popular option at the moment. And I'm going to do, I think, a few videos on this, I reckon, to take you through the process of converting one of our existing bikes to electric, adding an electrical assist to it. So this one really is going to be unboxing the kit, because unboxing is something that people seem to like to do on YouTube. So maybe this will increase my subscription numbers from 2 to something bigger than 2, which would be a result. But yeah, but right now, you know who you are. One of them's my partner, so yeah. So this is these 2 boxes. I apologise in advance if this isn't quite in the right place. I'm using. I've now worked out, I think, why everyone seems to be using these green pads. It's kind of the sort of thing that you get when you, if you think of yourself as trying to be a maker. Everyone who makes things seems to have one of these. This is a small one there. Some people have huge ones. I'm going to get a bigger one later. But it also helps me to tell whether things are vaguely in shot. So this is what we got. We got it from a company called Cyclotricity, which is in Glenrothes, which is in Scotland, I think. No affiliation. Can't really. We haven't even tried it. The gear out yet. I suppose all that we know about them is that they send stuff fairly promptly, and that they'll take your money, which is fine by me. What we got here was what's called the Mid Drive, mid motor. There's, as far as I can tell, there's 3 options for electric bikes. A motorized front wheel, I think, is the simplest, which essentially is just adding a motor to the front wheel of your bike, and that will pull you along as you pedal as well. A motorized rear wheel, which integrates with the rear wheel of your bike, which is, I suppose, a bit more complex because you're having to deal with the drivetrain and make sure that the wheel will accommodate whatever sprockets you've got, whatever cassette you've got on your at the back end of your bike. And that's the front wheel, the rear wheel, and then there is the mid drive, which is what we've got, which essentially replaces the cranks and chain rings of your bike with a motorized unit. So that's what we went for. We went for the largest battery size they had, because that was the only one that we could get, but I would probably have chosen that anyway, because I think we had the money to spend. So yeah, I don't know, I said 825 quid for the lot, which is a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but we had the money set aside to do it, and it's cheaper than a Tesla, so if that's good. So right, this says caution, lithium-ion battery, so I assume it contains lithium-ion battery, so I'll open it carefully. I don't know how. I hope it's not too explosive, otherwise I don't really want to stick it on the bike. So we'll cut down here. what have we got in here? We have got some packaging materials. A key. You can see that? Some keys. I assume that's to lock the thing to your bike. One thing to consider if you are electrifying your bike is that if, like us, all your bikes are quite old, well maintained and well looked after and probably pretty well set up, in my humble opinion, but essentially worthless. If you throw all this gear onto it, I suppose it immediately becomes worth at least £825 or whatever the second-hand resale value of stolen electrical assist equipment is. Probably less than that. So we're going to have to up our security measures, I think, from nothing to something. Okay. You can still see that. I'm just going to have a quick check. Am I keeping this in shot? There we go. So I'll take off this. Right, can we see? That is what we've got for the battery. Okay. It's quite heavy actually. They did say it was heavy, and it is. So this is intended to go on a Saracen Skyline, which is actually quite a nice bike. It will be in a later video when I actually start to fit this equipment to it. At the moment it's set up fairly light. I would characterise it as a fairly light, quick machine. Oh look, they give you some zip ties. Wow. Yeah, so I think it's a pretty lightweight, fast machine that we've set it up as. A fast sort of utility, you know. It's a sort of something you can ride to the shops, but you'll get there relatively quickly. I think I'm going to have to upgrade the wheel. I think I'm going to have to give it heavier wheels, slightly stronger wheels, and bigger tyres. At the moment, the wheels are kind of like racing, what you'd think of as a road bike wheels, really. I'm not quite sure what size they're. I won't embarrass myself trying to guess the numbers on the tyre size, but they are narrow and high pressure, so I think we'll probably have to reconfigure that with this extra weight on board. But that is a battery, and it says on it, do not short circuit, do not dismantle, do not place under high temperatures, do not place in fluids such as water, acid, alkaline or salt water, and don't ride it into the sea. If stored for a long time, keep the battery cool and dry. Charge the battery for 2 hours every other 3 months. Every other 3 months? Every 6 months? Always that smacks of translation. Lost in translation. Every other 3 months. Am I being stupid? 6 months? Okay, whatever. Always charge the battery with a licensed charger for lithium-ion and lithium polymer battery. Fair enough. I think, yeah, lithium-ion batteries are pretty special beasts, and yeah, they do need careful charging in my limited understanding of them. So, okay, so you get, so far we've got a battery, 2 cable ties for this presumably, and a cardboard box which my daughters will appreciate, and some packaging which I will probably hold on to for quite a long time before reluctantly throwing away, unless I can find something to insulate with it. Actually, the girls were trying to make a solar oven, so maybe we can pack that in round the solar oven to give them a bit more insulation. So that's all good. Oh, sorry, and I forgot. Oh God, I'm out of shot. A set of keys. Right. Okay. Can you see that? Box 2. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and obscure our address. Not that I'm really that worried, but I don't know. It feels like the right thing to do. I don't even know how to do that in the video editor yet, so that's going to be interesting. It's backhanded. Right. Okay, box two. Box two. We have got some hardware. Right, so we've got some what I can immediately recognise as crank bolts, other bolts, and some kind of bracket, I assume to support the motor. I'm not sure, all will become clear. We've got a chainring. So one thing to bear in mind, if you put one of these on your bike, you're replacing your existing chainrings with the motor manufacturer's chainring, which is compatible with their motor. So if, as we have, you've got, it's kind of, I think it's a 3x8 gear setup. You're going to lose your front three chainrings. So that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, I suppose the idea is that if you are adding electrical assist to your bike, you probably don't need the granny ring, as we call it, and you're probably not that bothered about losing a little bit of your top end. So this is a, again, I'm not going to try and guess the number of teeth, but I suspect it's a fairly middle of the range chainring. So you're probably going to lose a bit of your top end, but you should probably gain on your bottom end going uphill a bit quicker. So they give you, helpfully, a spanner, right, for fitting, I imagine. So they're a bit short on detail about what kind of bottom bracket this system will be compatible with. I've made the assumption, hopefully correctly, that it's a standard size. It looks fairly standard. They stipulate a bottom bracket width, but they don't stipulate a bottom bracket diameter. But I think they're quite standard in. They're quite standard for bog standard bikes, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't, but there was, up until the mountain biking and sort of hardcore road bikers started to come up with all sorts of mad bottom brackets, there was a fairly ubiquitous standard size. Sorry, what's this? So that's a mains lead, which I'm assuming you won't be using while you're riding it. This is the charger, right? So that's the charging setup. And I haven't got that in shot. So we've got a charger there and a mains lead to go with it, right? Okay. Add that to the pile. It's quite exciting. It's like Christmas. So this is the. Oh right, it's quite elegant. This is the motor unit. So I think I'll get this box out of the way for a second if I can. So yeah, so okay. Okay, so we've got a that is essentially going to become your bottom bracket. There is a external ring. Okay, So it's what I would call a externally threaded bottom bracket. So this will pass all the way through your. This will pass all the way through your bottom bracket shell on the bike here, and then these parts fit on the outside and squash the whole thing together. Okay. So I haven't, and I believe you can fit this to a, you can kind of retrofit this to the existing bottom bracket types that I was talking about. I think it will become clear with the when I get the bike in question into in a future video. So I'm slightly hesitant because I'm kind of worrying that I've bought something that's compatible with the bike, but I think the critical dimension is the width, which according to Cyclotricity's own details was within their limits. So hopefully that's all good. So can you still see that? Yeah. So we've got a motor. If I can turn it around a bit, that's a bit better, isn't it? So sorry, it's dark. So that, if you, I think that essentially the cyclotricity, which way around does it need to go? I think it sits in the frame like that. So if you can imagine, your frame is coming down like this. The chainstays are coming back like this. This is your drive side, and this is the non-drive side of the bottom bracket. It's not quite the right terminology, but so yeah, so that's sitting in the bottom of your bike basically. Or at least that's the theory. I hope we've done all right here. All will become clear. So I'll just do that up. Just seeing if there's anything on it. Okay. Right, I'm not going to start putting all the. So what have we got so far? Charge cable. This must go on. Yeah, this clearly bolts onto this. Once you've got it all in, you've got conventional square section pedals, axle for your bottom bracket, and a motor. More bits. Okay, so yes, brake levers. Okay, so the thing about this system is that if you are braking, you don't want to be driving. You don't want to be putting power through the motor while you're braking. So these, I think you can see inside. I assume that's a push to brake probably switch, so that as you pull the brake lever on, it actually sends a signal to the motor to stop putting power into the drivetrain. So that's something you have to do. You have to replace those. Now, it's an interesting issue. I am aware that so first of all, if you've got disc brakes, they will need to be mechanically actuated, but I'm not sure whether the pull on these is compatible with that. I'm hoping, stroke guessing, that these brake levers are for conventional V-brake type brakes, which are the most common, or were on slightly lower end bikes now. So yeah, that's a sort of a bit of a blind spot really, where unless I'm missing something, whether these can be reconfigured for V-brakes or cantilever brakes or even mechanically operated disc brakes, but that is an issue. So we'll have to look at that and see if there's any way of see how we're going to get around that issue if it is a problem. What else have we got? We're still in shot, yeah, there we go. Right, instruments, some instrumentation. I'm assuming that's going to give you some data on how much power you've got left in your system. I think also you will be controlling how much assistance you're getting from the system. Cabling. Okay, so cabling. Quite a lot of cabling. What have we got here? Okay, so there's some kind of interesting, yeah, I'm not quite sure what that is. I think there is an element of either cadence or speed sensing in the system. It probably, I suspect it starts to feed assistance out above a certain speed because for legal reasons, I'm not sure on that. What have we got here? That looks like, that to me looks like it's got very thin pins, so that's some form of data being transmitted through that. Okay, so we've got like an 8-pin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-pin connector there, and then we've got 2, 4, 7, 5, 12 out at the end. So I assume some of these are shared across these for some reason, which will become clear, no doubt. Crank arms, just in case you, I suppose, yeah, you will need them, I suspect, in some instances. Two plain crank arms, because by and large on your bike your crank arm's going to be integrated with your chain rings, so those chain rings and that crank arm are going to go away, and so yeah, that is sensible. You get 2 plain chain rings, and also, yeah, interestingly, so yeah, you get some zip ties as well. How about that? Exciting. It's worth 825 quid just to get 5 zip ties in my view. So that's a right and that's a left. Yeah, so the thing is that crank the thread for the pedals, one of the crank arms is reverse threaded. I can't remember which. So it would be unusual in a way to find a which it was. So the right, I think it's looking forward along the bike. Let's make that assumption. So if you've got a right and a left crank arm, this one would have all your drive, your chain rings on it. It's quite unusual, I would suggest, to be able to find a crank arm with no spider to carry chain rings with that thread. So it's sensible to include 2 plain crank arms, unless I'm talking total rubbish. I'm sure I'll be told if I am. And that's your lot. Absolutely no documentation at all. No documentation. So I don't... Ooh. So I suspect there will be some information on Cyclotricity's website to help us along. Now I think... So yeah, all this equipment is... I mean, it's branded Cyclotricity. I don't know. So this will have been put together out of a number of different manufacturers' stock equipment. That one is a Reintion. Can you pronounce that? Reintion. Interesting. Re-entry prevention. This says cyclotricity. These guys, 250 watts restricted. It's got a. I think. I don't want to get into trouble here, but I think this might be a Bafang. I think Bafang makes something very, very close to this. As far as we can tell from looking around, Bosch and Bafang seem to have really nailed the market on, particularly these mid drives. These brake levers are Wuxing. I mean, these are not going to be. These are not quality levers, really. Not to diminish Wuxing's doubtless very high quality engineering for the price, but this is something that really is apparent when it comes to electric bikes, is that they tend to this is expensive gear, and so the really your energy storage and the drive unit are going to be quite complex, really quite complex pieces of machinery. So they're not going to be cheap to put together, and so I think corners tend to be cut wherever they can. They assume that you're not going for a high performance setup, which is probably quite right. This thing's just going to be a bit of a tractor, to be honest. But so yeah, I mean, this is fairly bog as far as I can. I mean, it's kind of the sort of thing you'd expect to find on a not a fabulously high end bike, to be honest, as far as I can see. But that's okay, because we're going for comfort, not speed. So that is, yeah. So that's what you get. Hopefully that's of some interest. The next video I will address the actual fitting of this system to our bike and take both my subscribers through the process of taking the existing componentry off the old bike and replacing it with the new parts that we need to add. And also, hopefully by that stage I will have found an instruction manual of some form online to see if there's any guidance out there. But I'm sure we can find our way around it. I have a certain amount of experience with bike maintenance, but I don't think any of this should be something that would completely freak out somebody who'd done basic stuff. Taking the bottom bracket out might be a bit of a challenge, but that's about it, really. I think taking the bottom bracket off will be a challenge. You'll have to pull off the chain rings, the cranks. So you have to crank puller, bottom bracket remover. You'll have to take all that off. You shouldn't have to break the chain, I don't think. Well, you might have to. Depends on how well this fits with the chain length as it stands. So the interesting thing, just another thing to note, is that with this system, you're going to have, you're only really going to have the 8, 7, 8 or 9, whatever speeds you've got at the back end available to you. You'll have lost your front, as I've mentioned, but so you have to take all the kit, the shifters, all that sort of stuff off the front, which will save a tiny bit of weight before you add about 5 kilos of ironmongery to it, and lithium ironmongery. So yeah, so that's that. There was another thing. Yeah, this you're not going to get any regenerative braking out of this, which is another issue. I'm not quite sure. I don't know what the state of play with regen braking is in cycling, but because this is driving through you're going to be driving through your freewheel. There isn't really a way for the driven wheel at the back to back drive the motor, which would be the only way the way that you would get regen braking. I assume that some of the more sophisticated systems, and maybe the integrated electric motor hubs you get on the front wheels and back wheels that people use, I'm assuming that there may be some regenerative action with those, either just when you're coasting or actually some active regenerative braking. I don't know. I'm not sure how well. I mean, it's all very complex, and I don't really understand it, or I don't. It's probably understandable, but it's not straightforward. Whether whether lithium-ion batteries really like to have that kind of intermittent charging, discharging cycles. I tend to think of batteries as being very temperamental beasts, and really liking to be they like to be treated very gently and in a very particular way. So maybe regen braking at the bike level is not really something that's of any use. But if anyone knows any better out of my 2 subscribers, please feel free to comment and tell me what I'm getting. There seems to be some form of a ratcheting freewheel mechanism in the motor as well. I'm sure if I gave it more than about a second's thought, I could work out why that is. But I can't do it while I'm talking on camera. So there we are. My intention is to do another video where I begin to grapple with actually fitting this to a bike. I suppose the first thing would be pulling the old stuff off the old machine, and then just going through that process, and then the process of mounting the new kit in its place. So yeah, to borrow from Fully Charged, which I'd recommend anyone to go and look at if you have been watching. Thank you. So I completely got that wrong. If you have been, thank you for watching, is what they always say. So there we are. So see you on the next one, which is something that someone else says. So I'm going to think of something original. But yeah, old bike being pulled to pieces in the next video as soon as I get round to it, which should hopefully be soon. Okay, thank you. Bye now.